It's amazing what people will do when they're desperate for money. Times are tough, and I'm one of those people. I needed to find money quickly to get my daughter, Denny, the life-saving medical treatment she desperately needed. Desperation kept me awake every night, worrying about what might happen to her next. After losing her mother in a car crash a year ago, I couldn't afford to lose Denny too. I searched everywhere for a job that paid enough and had night shifts. I looked through newspapers, drove around town, and checked every possible place, but nothing seemed to work. Our town was small, and job opportunities were scarce. Just when I was about to give up hope, I saw a small grocery store about a mile from home called Shoe's Nighttime Convenience and Grocery. It was strange because the store was closed during the day, only opening around 8 o'clock in the evening and staying open until the early morning. The store looked old and run down, but it still had signs advertising sales and clearance items. The front looked like a normal grocery store, which made me feel a bit better. When I got closer, I noticed some strange symbols under the store's name. They looked like Japanese characters, which I didn't understand. I decided to go inside. The store was much bigger than I expected. There were many aisles filled with groceries, household items, and even some clothes. Most customers seemed normal, but a few preferred to shop late at night. I tried not to stare, but one person gave me a creepy glare that made me uneasy. The staff looked like any other grocery store employees, diverse and with no obvious signs of being upset or happy. Near the checkouts, there wasn't much talking, which was odd. I wanted to find the manager to ask about a job. Then, I saw a sign that said "Help Wanted." It seemed like a good sign, but when I read the full message, it said, "Help Wanted, but not always needed." That was confusing, so I decided to find someone to ask. As I walked to the back office, I knocked on the door. A big man wearing a blue apron and a name badge greeted me. His name was Benny, the store manager. He smiled at me, but his smile looked forced, like he was hiding something. "Hello, can I help you find something today?" he asked. I tried to ignore his strange expression and said, "Yes, I'm here to apply for a job." I pointed to the "Help Wanted" sign. Benny stopped smiling and looked at the sign. He seemed about to say something, but then held up a finger and pulled out a radio. "Molly, what's the bagger situation today? How are we holding up staff-wise?" he asked. There was no answer. Benny smiled again, but it was a weird, unsettling smile. He tapped his fingers on his tie and waited. His face twisted, and he finally said, "I'm sorry, I think we're full at the moment, but thanks for your interest." He was about to send me away when his radio buzzed with static. I couldn't hear everything, but it sounded like someone named Rob had a problem and got bagged. I didn't know what that meant, but before I could ask, Benny muttered, "All right, but next time answer faster. It could have been a code black, and if you mess around with those customers, it's your as next." I stood there, confused and silent. Benny turned back to me with a fake smile and said, "Congratulations, there's an opening available now. Let's get you set up. Can you start tonight?" I was shocked. They wanted me to start immediately without any interview or checking my background. "Yes, right now?" I asked, surprised. "Yes," Benny replied. "Don't worry, we'll sort out the legal stuff later. But tonight, we're busier than usual and need the help." We talked about the terms and some paperwork. I wasn't sure what he meant, but I thought it might be about pay. "What's the pay and benefits?" I asked. It felt strange to ask so soon, but I needed the money badly. Benny said, $45 an hour is the pay for baggers, which is our starting rate. I couldn't believe it. It was double what I was making at my day job. Benny cut me off. saying they value hard work and integrity and needed me to sign a non-disclosure agreement, NDA. It felt weird, but the high pay was too good to pass up. I eagerly agreed. Very good decision. Welcome to the shoe family, Benny said. He went to get me an apron and a name tag. An older man named Ed came out, holding an apron and limping a bit. I smiled and introduced myself, but Ed just looked me up and down and snorted. I ignored him and waited for him to say something. Before I could ask when the training would start, Ed interrupted me. You know, bagging is bagging groceries, he said without any friendliness. I tried to explain that I had never worked at a grocery store before, but Ed just nodded and laughed in a harsh way. Not like this, he said. I'm guessing you don't know. All right then, come on. I'll show you how we do the bagging and the other rules. You better listen closely. I ain't repeating myself. We walked towards the back room when Benny's radio came alive again. I heard a nervous voice say, "Code black on number 3. Ed looked annoyed and shouted something into the radio before leaving me there, stunned and confused. What was a code black? Why was everyone scared of them? I was about to look for someone when a woman with a tag that said, "Assistant Manager Molly," put her hand on my shoulder. She smiled at me genuinely. "I'm sorry, we haven't met. You must be the new hire. I'm Molly. I can help you with training and orientation. You'll be a great asset here at Shoes." She led me to the back doors and ushered me into the back room. The hallways were filled with doors that looked like ice boxes and shelves with strange items like chemicals, metal tools, and crates labeled with gun manufacturers' names. It was messy, and I was glad I didn't have to sort anything. We went to a small office with bright blue walls that reminded me of Danny's kindergarten. Molly gestured for me to sit down. The office was simple, with a desk, some chairs, and a file cabinet. On the walls, there were black characters that looked like fancy writing. I wondered what they meant. Molly asked me to sit at a chair facing her desk. She looked through some papers on her clipboard, then started searching the file cabinet. Suddenly, a loud shriek came from outside. I looked to the door and gasped, but Molly didn't react. I thought maybe she didn't hear it. Just then, she turned around with a large binder and threw it onto the desk. "Before training starts, please fill out this form for your safety and ours," she said, handing me a piece of paper that looked like the NDA Benny mentioned. It seemed odd that I had to sign this without other hiring documents like tax forms or healthcare papers. Maybe they were paying people under the table. I didn't think much of it and signed quickly, not realizing what I was agreeing to. Molly looked over the paper and said, "Good, that's settled. Let's get started. This is the employee handbook. We only have one, so you'll be doing some light reading for a bit because we need the manpower now. I'll go through it with you quickly since Ed is unavailable." She grimaced, looked at her watch, and adjusted her walkie-talkie. Then she continued, "As a bagger, you are vital in ensuring customers leave satisfied with their products. You are one of the last people they will see on the way out, except in certain circumstances." She cleared her throat loudly, and I heard some muffled noise from somewhere else. She continued, "Basic rules and code of conduct are as follows. You are to bag products to the customer's satisfaction. The first thing you ask customers is what type of bags they want. Whatever they say, you use. Do not ask about or discuss the customer's purchases, no matter how curious or talkative they are. No questions, period. Understood?" I nodded and said, "Yes, understood." "Good," she said, moving on. "No assistance may be provided to customers for loading or unloading things from their vehicles. If a customer requests help to their vehicle, do not assist or leave the building with them or any customer at any time regardless of the story they give you. It's our policy, and they know this. If requests persist or you feel intimidated or threatened, press the yellow button at the end of each checkout by the bagging station. A security person will escort the offending customer to aisle 4 for processing and detainment. I thought that sounded strange. Detainment? They don't just kick them out? I wondered. She continued, the most important rule. Occasionally, there will be a special bag request. You will know it when you hear it. If ordered, press the black button by the end of the checkout and proceed with code black protocol. These guests are normally our highest paying customers and often are here at the pleasure of Mr. Shu himself. They must be attended to as quickly as possible. There, that's code black again. What was a special bag? She ignored my worried look and said, cell phones, smartwatches, or anything that can be used as a recording device are strictly prohibited while on duty, for the customer's sake and our own. The store closes exactly at 4:00 am. Any customers who remain will be escorted out. The only exception is customers involved in a code black. No access is allowed to the basement and inventory backrooms. Only managers and stock employees are allowed. Simple, right? She asked, flashing another smile. Any questions? I started to ask, but she cut me off mid-sentence, talking over me. Good. I knew you looked like a fast learner. Come on, let's get you out to the check stands and bagging. She grabbed my shoulder firmly and pulled me out of the office back into the store. I saw some customers staring at me as I was led to a checkout with a flickering number 3 next to it. The other 2 checkouts were busy with customers waiting in line. We stopped, and Molly cleared her throat loudly to get the attention of a young man with dirty blonde hair and an unimpressed look. Hello, Lee. This is our new bagger. Show him the ropes and try to be easy on him. It's his first day. I know it's busy, but we don't need another Rob situation so soon. Have fun, you two. She walked away without another word. I was left with Lee. He was staring at me, and I tried to break the ice. Hi, my name is. But he responded abruptly. Save it. I don't want to get attached just in case. I liked Rob, he was my friend. Now, well, it's best not to talk about what happened to him. Just do your job and follow the rules, and you should be fine. I didn't know how to respond to his bluntness, but he seemed nicer than Ed. So I walked up to the bagging station, gave him a mock salute, and tried to smile. It was going to be a long night. The first customer came through, and Lee quietly scanned their items. I grabbed some nearby bags when I felt a sharp kick to my leg. Lee glared at me like I had done something terrible. I looked at the customer, an older woman, who was frowning at me. Hello, what type of bag would you like? I asked. She sneered and said, flatly paper, please, pretending not to notice me as I bagged her groceries, mostly produce, meat, and dairy. There were a few odd items like kitchen knives and boxes of what looked like firearm ammunition. I was about to ask about them, but remembered the rules. I tried to ignore it and continued bagging her items. She left without saying a word, and more customers lined up. As the night went on, I saw more unusual items being purchased: zip ties, large amounts of medical sedatives, candy, various weapons, ammunition, and even large fruits like watermelon and honeydew. I thought someone might be using them for target practice until I saw a Kevlar vest and a lot of alcohol. After a dozen disturbing customers, I finally met someone friendly, a kindly old woman named Marge. She enjoyed talking to me as she bought baking supplies like eggs, butter, flour, and spices. You must try my raspberry tart, she said. It's divine. I'll bring some next time. Or better yet, I have some in my car. Won't you help an old woman with her groceries? I was about to accept when Lee's face went blank and he shook his head. Marge had a wide grin, and I looked down to see her groceries. There were containers of chemicals like rat poison, bleach, and ammonia. I froze. No thank you, Mom. Store policy, we are not to escort customers out of the store under any conditions, I said. Her grin vanished, and her face turned angry. Oh well, your loss. I suppose I would have made it spectacular. I thought I might get one of the new ones before you figured it out. Next time, Sonny, I might just find where you live and make a house call. She winked and pushed her cart away. I was shocked and scared. Lee elbowed me and pointed to the customer who had taken her place. I had to ignore another uncomfortable encounter that night. After a long shift of bagging disturbing items for strange customers, I realized my work was done when a loud announcement came over the PAR system. It is now 4 o'clock, and we are closing. If you have not purchased your items, you must leave. If you are loading goods, remember that no employees may leave with you. You must take them and leave. If you do not, they will be confiscated. Any customers lingering in the store will be confiscated as well. They were serious about closing on time. A large group of people I hadn't seen before moved through the aisles with flashlights and batons. They looked more like paramilitary forces than grocery store security guards. They were searching for anyone who was still inside. I remembered the announcement about confiscating people left behind and felt worried. I was escorted out along with the other staff, leaving silently. I tried to joke with Lee, asking if there was ever overtime, but he just kept his head down and ignored me. I didn't know what kind of place this was, but the more I learned, the more I felt like I had made a terrible mistake. I had to keep the job for a few more weeks to save enough money for Danny's treatment. Shoes was strange, but I needed the money. I worked at Shoes for a few more uncomfortable weeks, dealing with odd conversations and bagging creepy and strange items for unsettling customers. I saw 2 code blacks during that time. Lee told me not to look and to avoid the customers who ordered them. In my second week, I didn't see Jay, the other bag boy. Lee warned me not to ask about him, and I became more scared of what a code black was. The only good news was that the store paid weekly, and almost no taxes were taken out of my paycheck. I had almost $2,800 from the first 2 weeks. With a bit more money from my other job, I could afford Danny's treatment. I just needed 2 more weeks and then I could quit and never return to the creepy store. I managed to avoid trouble for my 3rd week, but in my last week, I had a terrible encounter with a customer. It started a series of horrible events that still threaten my family's safety and scare me to this day. It was about 11 p.m, and things were going okay. Some managers were moving around, and there was a strange feeling of worry and anticipation. Lee told me that the owner, Mr. Shu, would be stopping by that night. I tried to ask more about the owner when a large, bald man came to our checkout. He wore horn-rimmed glasses and had a big, jowly face with a staring glare that made me very uncomfortable. He tried to chat with me, but I got bad vibes from him. I ignored him, but he kept insisting. "Ah, come on, man. Lighten up. I see you're new here. What's it like working here? You see any real action?" I simply asked. "What type of bag would you like, sir?" He replied, "I will show you my bag if you show me yours," then laughed loudly, almost knocking his glasses off. His eyes had a sick gleam. After a moment, he said, "Plastic's fine, I suppose. Just trying to lighten the mood. You look tense, like you could use a break." I ignored him and kept bagging his items: junk food, pliers, lube, condoms, and chemicals like bleach and OxyClean. I had already been hurt by some of the strange customers and the odd items they bought, but this one seemed even worse. "Yeah, You could definitely use a break. Hey, I know. I can give you a little pick-me-up in my car. I'm right outside. Help me take this stuff out, and I'm your huckleberry. I couldn't respond. My skin crawled, and I wanted to run away to another town. I remembered the rule book and said, "We are not allowed to leave the store with customers for any reason." He didn't let it go. "Ah, come on. You're just playing hard to get. Seriously, I'm sure I can pay you more than these people. Come on, what do you say? Come on out, and we can talk about it." I repeated the rules while bagging his last items, but he wouldn't stop. "Hey, listen to me. You think you're too good for me. You think you're some kind of hotshot. Well, you're coming outside now. No one ignores me like this. I have a special treat in store for stubborn pricks who don't listen to me." His face turned bright red, and he spat the words out at me. I panicked, but remembered the button by the bagging station. I pressed it discreetly while trying to stay strong. He moved closer, looking like he was going to grab me. Suddenly, a large gloved hand grabbed his shoulder. I looked behind him and saw a nearly 7-foot tall man wearing a mix of police riot gear and military armor holding him back. The customer turned around and shouted at the security team, "Do you pricks know who I am? I know the owner. You will all be sorry you crossed me." "I'm going to." A sickening crunch was heard, and the man went limp. The guard holstered a bloodied baton and bent down over the dazed customer. His eyes were glazed, and he probably had a concussion, but he was still conscious. The guard seized him by the throat and lifted him to his feet. The customer tried to whisper, "Wait, wait," before he was punched so hard in the chest, I thought I heard his ribs break. The helmeted guard looked at me and asked, what type of bag was he using? I had no idea what that meant, but I answered, "Plastic." He chuckled behind his mask. Too bad he didn't pick paper. The guard dumped one of the man's bags as he tried to stand up. He placed the plastic bag around the customer's head and tightened it. I watched in horror as he easily strangled him. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. After a few moments, it was over. I was speechless. Another guard came over and took the customer's body on a stretcher to the back room. Benny, the store manager, appeared out of nowhere and spoke to us. "I'm sorry you had to see that, but I'm glad you're safe. We take threats very seriously here and know you all need to be safe in such dangerous times. That's why we keep this place safe from dangerous people like that. I trust what happened here will also be safe and secure with you. After all, we wouldn't want you endangered by anyone like that. Knowing where you live, right?" He smiled at us and left for the back rooms. I understood the hidden threat and realized I couldn't tell the authorities or report this place. Despite that encounter, my night wasn't over, and the worst was yet to come. Lee wouldn't talk to me about what we both saw, and we tried to move on with the night, pretending what we saw didn't happen. It was getting close to 4 o'clock, and we would be able to close soon. I was so close to leaving this place and going home to my little girl. I just needed to hang on for a couple more days. There were only a few more customers lining up at the checkouts when something odd happened. A well-dressed man went to checkout number 2, and they shut off the light, saying the scanner wasn't working anymore. It seemed fishy since it had been fine all night. Then, the guards gave worried looks and concerned faces, then back at the well-dressed man. I realized they might know something I didn't. My heart sank, thinking he might be one of those special customers. I looked over at Lee, and he was sweating and fumbling with the cash register. The man walked over to the checkout with a small basket filled with fine sewing thread, thimbles, and tailoring articles. He also had a hacksaw, a plaster cast, and several boxes of nails and rivets that didn't match the sewing items. I didn't think much of it and relaxed a bit. Lee was pale and quietly scanned the small items. After they passed through the conveyor belt, the man turned to me, tipped his hat, and introduced himself. "Good evening, my friend. My name is Henry Jasper. I work for a little antique clothes shop, and I'm here to get some materials." I felt a bit more at ease, thinking it wasn't too strange. I asked, "What type of bags would you like today, Mr. Jasper?" He replied, "Well, my good fellow, I should think of paper for the small bits you see here. Indeed, I found all the tailoring kits I need to make work anyone would be proud of. But what I really need today are some raw materials. So the bag I really need will be a body bag tonight, preferably the larger variety." My mind raced and my heart pounded. Did he just say he needed a body bag? I was about to ask him to repeat himself when it hit me. The rules had said there would be special bag requests, and I would know when to hear them. I realized I had just encountered my first code black. I forced myself to move, trembling, and pressed the black button under the bagging station. I heard an alert on nearby walkie-talkies. Code black on number 3. Confirmations echoed all around. There was a burst of motion near the back, and I handed Mr. Jasper his bag of smaller merchandise as Benny approached us. "Good evening, Mr. Jasper," Benny said, struggling to speak and looking unusually nervous. "Oh, Benny, don't worry. I know what I asked for. And though you are a big fella, I wouldn't dream of picking you. We go too far back. Besides, your skin is terrible. Can you imagine one of our suits on you?" Mr. Jasper laughed loudly, and Benny joined in with a nervous chuckle. "Your new employee, however, has a nice strong jaw and broad shoulders, though not much meat." He looked me over, and I was confused and terrified by what he was implying as he eyed me. Benny spoke up again. "Of course, you're free to pick as you please, but if I could suggest an option, we just picked up a rather unruly fellow who was processed a few hours ago. He's on the larger side, perhaps a good alternative." "Of course, Benny. You and your new hire lead the way," I said, following Benny between him and Mr. Jasper. We went into the back and then through a keycard locked door that led into the basement. Benny gave me an apologetic look as we descended. What I saw in the basement shocked me. The place was dark and freezing. It looked like a meat locker. But when the light turned on, I gasped in horror. We were surrounded by rows of body bags, almost all full of corpses in various states of decay. It looked like a morgue. I realized they had been dealing with these products the whole time. I laughed quietly to myself in despair, thinking about the options: paper, plastic, and body bags. I remembered the rule about selecting a person and thought of others who had handled code blacks and were never seen again, like Rob. Rob was bagged. I stood there, mouth open, trembling at the nightmare before me. Mr. Jasper calmly examined the corpses, checking them out and moaning in disgust. He came across the body Benny had pointed out and said, "My, he's a big fellow. A lot of material they would love to use. Skin is a little dry in places, a touch of eczema. That's all right, though." Benny said, "Old chum, you have a deal. I will tell Mr. Shu." Benny sighed in relief and started to guide me out of the basement. As we left, I saw Mr. Jasper's pick the belligerent customer from earlier. His face had a large dent from being smashed by security. His face was pale, and his eyes were still staring, even in death. Why was he down here in a body bag? Why did it sound like he was just purchased? My mind struggled to understand how and why this was happening. Suddenly, Mr. Jasper caught my hand and placed a card in my palm. "As for you, my fine friend, we would love to have a worker like you at our establishment. She runs a tight ship here, but we are a bit freer-spirited at the tailor. Take care," he said, and left with his horrific purchase. I was led upstairs, and I heard Benny talking to someone. I snapped back to reality and saw a new face looking at me. An older man with intense, unblinking eyes that seemed to bore into my soul stood before me. He spoke in a stern but oddly soothing voice. I know you might be unsettled by what you saw, but she knew. The means to access it are natural parts of life. It is what you saw, it is what we sell. We sell it in all its forms, which is why it is even in our name. I hope you understand and do not consider anything foolish. Over the next few days, we value your work, but understand that some people lack the fortitude to deal with what our business does. Just don't forget that when you head back home to your house on 4th Avenue, the large cherry tree at the end of the street is blossoming and looks beautiful. You should take your daughter to see it while it still blooms. He placed a hand on my shoulder and squeezed before departing. I had no idea what I had just witnessed, but knew I was in trouble. My mind was a jumble, and besides the imminent threat, I found myself thinking about something else inane. I remembered what Mr. Shu had said about how they sell it. I looked again at the store sign as I was leaving Shu's nighttime convenience and grocery. At first, I hadn't thought much of it, but I looked closer at the kanji by the first word. I looked up the meaning on my phone and saw it was the kanji for death, sometimes used when counting the number 4 in Japanese, but more often associated with something else. The horror and simplicity of the name made sense now. Shu often translates to death. I had worked almost an entire month at Death's nighttime convenience and grocery. I didn't go back. I quit. I decided to find another way to make the rest of the money I needed. My family's safety was the most important thing now, and I knew it wasn't safe for me and Denny to stay here anymore. How could it be safe when Mr. Death knows where we live?